Protesters showed up for Vice President J.D. Vance today as he and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller made a lunch appearance with some National Guard members that President Trump deployed to Washington, D.C. And at times, the chants even drown out Vance as he was speaking to reporters, prompting him and Miller to respond.
I think you hear these guys outside here screaming at us. Of course, these are a bunch of crazy protesters. But I'll tell you, a couple of years ago when I brought my kids here, they were being screamed at by violent vagrants, and it was scaring the hell out of my kids.
We're going to ignore these stupid white hippies that all need to go home and take a nap because they're all over 90 years old.
So the moment illustrates a sharp divide between the Trump administration and D.C. residents who overwhelmingly voted against the president and, according to new polling, do not believe his federal takeover is making the city safer. While Democrats and local officials point to the statistics showing violent crime falling in recent years, Vance asserted today that those numbers are wrong.
I think that crime statistics all over our country were massively underreported because a lot of people would pick up the phone, they'd call somebody, they'd try to get help, and nobody would show up.
Are you going to be releasing evidence of this?
Of what? That D.C. has a terrible crime problem? You just got to look around.
My political sources tonight are Alyssa Farah Griffin, former Trump White House communications director, and Amisha Cross, Democratic strategist and former Obama campaign advisor. Alyssa, if you live in D.C. or you have lived in D.C. anytime recently, I have for well over a decade, full disclosure, the experience of living here kind of tracks with these statistics. But the dip in crime doesn't fit the Trump narrative. And so now you have administration officials like Vance saying, OK, the numbers are fake. How do you expect that they are going to try to prove that point?
I don't know that they're going to try to prove it. Listen, I think that the White House is trying to goad Democrats into arguing D.C., the nation's capital, is totally safe. There's nothing to see here. There are no, camps set up and tents that you see around D.C. That's what they want. They want to have that fight because, well, the stats don't help their case. There's always going to be things you could point to, whether it's carjackings or violent attacks that take place. And as you and I were talking off air, we've lived in D.C. Several years ago, it did get pretty bad. Coming out of COVID, there was just a spike in crime that was taking place. And now it's really evened out. But the stats don't really bear out what the White House is saying. But I would caution Democrats to go too far in arguing the other direction because there are always going to be bad actors that you can point to.
Yeah, certainly. And Amisha, that's really the thing, because this focus on immigration and crime, public safety, that helped Trump. I mean, it helped win over some voters for him, even in states where maybe you think he wouldn't. New York, New Jersey, California in 2024. How do Democrats who know this and know that that narrative resonates, walk that line between fighting back against what they're saying, which may be untrue, but not appearing soft on crime or like impervious to some crime that is obviously happening?
Partially, I think that they have to they have a very thin line to walk, being that Trump was able to succeed because he perpetuated a crime narrative. We know that he ran on in 2020, and we know that he also ran on again in 2024. And to a certain extent, people believed it. He is somebody who pushes narrative, and narrative is what matters to people. It's how they feel. It's not necessarily what the polling shows or what the numbers and data show, regardless of the policy. I think that for Democrats, it is acknowledging that there are people who still feel unsafe in various cities across America, including in D.C. Yes, it's happening in certain pockets of the city, not all across the city. We are not living in a hellscape here in D.C. We can acknowledge that, but also that there are public and private partnerships that need to take place to ensure that the city is safe, that people need to be listened to in the communities, particularly the communities of color and Black women who have called out for decades here in this city a lot of the tragic things that are happening in their communities, be it whether it's sexual assault, robbery, you name it. But in addition to that, I think that Democrats have to also call his bluff. Be willing to call him out on working with the administration in ways that exist outside of the National Guard. We know that this is not what the National Guard is used for. We also know that in the states that have utilized sending National Guard troops to D.C., Mississippi, for instance, I have family in Mississippi. Mississippi, in Jackson, Mississippi, the state capital, has a much higher crime rate than D.C. does. So if anybody needed the National Guard based on the epidemiology that Trump is using, keep them in Mississippi. I think that we need to refocus the effort, showcase why it's important to have reductions in crime, but also showcase how we get here and be willing to work with Republicans on that and bring them to the table, but not in the sense of the National Guard, because there are ways to do it, scientific based. We know that they work. It's one of the reasons why crime has gone down in Chicago, in Baltimore, in DC, you name it, since the pandemic.
After 30 days, this federal takeover of DC police is going to turn into a pumpkin without Congress extending the authorization or authorizing an extension. What does it mean if Congress does go along with this? Do you expect, Amisha, there's a stomach for it? What do you think?
I don't think there's definitely not a stomach for it amongst Democrats. I think that for Republicans, it's going to depend on what the numbers look like. I will give Trump this. He is very strategic in his timing. As we talked about before, the show came back on, one of the things that is recognized here in D.C. and in a lot of major cities is that the rise in crime, as well as the drop, is precipitated by youth violence for the most part, youth actors. School has started back. The reason why Trump created this messaging around the time, a week before school started back, was because at the end of the day, now these kids are in school. It was going to go down automatically. Towards the end of the summer, in every major city in America, crime tends to go down. That is something that we've seen season after season, year after year. So I think that he's going to use that as a means to showcase that his plan is working, irrespective to the fact that this is traditionally just how things work.
Yeah, what do you think of this perhaps being longer term?
Well, listen, it's a tough question for Congress because if you're a Republican in Congress, of course, you want to back the president's agenda and you're going to get pressure to do that. But it's never been a Republican or conservative position to say that the entire United States taxpayer should be paying to secure the streets of D.C. That's simply not the case. And using the National Guard to do it rather than local law enforcement goes against decades of what we argued when we were talking about the responsibilities of our nation's capital versus the rest of the country. So I think it's kind of a tough argument to have. What I suspect is when the statute runs out, is that they're going to declare victory. They're going to talk about the number of arrests they were able to make. They're going to talk about certain pockets of the city they felt that they cleaned up, and then they're going to move on. But this won't be the last time. I mean, we saw it in LA where the National Guard was deployed. There are going to be other major cities where the White House decides that this is the time to use force. And I would just remind folks, the National Guard, this is something they can do. It's something they legally can. But this is a force that is big. It is diverse. It is politically diverse as well. These are not people who raised their hands to serve because they wanted to police the streets of the United States. They would have gone into policing if that's what they wanted to do. This is not the best use. We're in hurricane season. We're in a time when there are so many other things you could have our forces responding to that is not policing the streets of D.C.
Yeah, as you say, kids are back in school. So are the kids of these Guard members, and they're missing it. Alyssa, Amisha, thank you so much for both of you being here tonight.